Hey y'all, it's Leela with Miss Kiss Creations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's Tumbler tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this peekaboo glittered breast cancer tumbler. Like always, all of my materials will be listed in my description below, including some links and coupon codes for y'all to check out. And don't forget to find me on my other socials. I am found on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. If y'all have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on any of my socials or leave a comment. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. I'm starting with a 30-ounce skinny stainless steel tumbler from Makerflow Crafts. I am sanding my tumbler down with a 180 grit sanding block, and then once I sand that tumbler and I'm finished with that, I wipe it down with 91% alcohol before I go to paint my tumbler. I do this process with every single tumbler. This is how I prep all of my tumblers. I am using my Pop of Color white paint to paint my tumbler. I am choosing to paint it because this is what I have on hand. So if you would like to spray paint your tumbler white or even a pink, then you can go ahead and do that. Again, I just had this on hand, so I thought this would be the easiest way to do my first coat. And I apply that paint all around the tumbler, and do not forget the bottom. This paint takes about 20 to 25 minutes to dry. Once that paint was dried, I then went over this dried coat and I added Mod Podge. That was my adhesive that I chose to adhere that glitter. So you can also do a second coat of paint, but I was getting low on that paint and I didn't want to waste it, so I decided to do my adhesive using Mod Podge instead of that white paint. So that is Mod Podge I am putting on the tumbler, not the white paint. I'm now going in with Fairytale from Glitter Heart Co, and I'm applying that glitter all around the tumbler. I am using a fine glitter, so this was very easy to apply. I just apply it, tap it off, and then continue to apply while that Mod Podge is still wet. And once all my glitter was applied to the tumbler, I did not have to seal this with anything. I just allowed that Mod Podge to dry. I only seal my glitters if I have 2 or more colors, and I was not worried about this glitter going anywhere since it was one colored glitter. And while that tumbler was dried, I moved on to my Cricut design space. I am using the font Bounty from Duff Font, and I am adding the word Survivor, and then I'm making a offset with 0.050, and I am not slicing these two. I'm just cutting the bottom half and the top half. I am using 631 vinyl, so the bottom half I am using this white vinyl. It does not matter what color because that's going to act as a template. And then the top one, I'm going to actually place that on the tumbler and then keep that on the tumbler. So this color matters. I've chosen a printed vinyl from the Vinyl Cottage, and I thought you would be able to see the ribbons a little better than what you can see, but I hope you get the concept, or I hope people get the concept. And I am just weeding that very slowly because, like I said, it is printed or patterned vinyl. So just weed this and then put that to the side. We'll use that towards the end of the tumbler. So again, those 2 pieces, the offset, the bottom, I am using that as a template. And then the top, which is that pink or darker pink printed vinyl, that's what I'm going to keep, and that's what's going to be on the tumbler. I've also cut a lot of these ribbons. I placed them about 1/2 inch to 1 inch in Cricut Design Space, and I've also offsetted those as well. And you'll see later on in the video that I'll use the offset or the outline for the top of the tumbler. So I'm just doing all my weeding now just to get it out of the way so I can save me some more time in the future. So I've also applied epoxy to my tumbler, about 20 to 30 milliliters of epoxy. Since it is fine glitter, I didn't need too much epoxy. So I've epoxied that and my epoxy cured, and then I'm going around and I'm sanding my tumbler with a 220 grit sanding block. I'm choosing a finer grit just so I don't sand away that glitter. And then I'm using an X-Acto knife and I'm cutting that rim of the tumbler, just removing any of that cured excess epoxy. And then I'm taking a 180 grit sanding block and I'm sanding away that rim, and I'm leaving the tiniest bits of stainless steel exposed at the top just to have that good seal when I go to seal on that tumbler at the very end with that last coat of epoxy. And once I was finished sanding, I wiped it down with 91% alcohol, and then now I'm adding those templates or vinyl to the tumbler. So I'm adding that bottom half of the offset, that survivor, onto the tumbler. This is going to act as a template. So remember, I am using removable vinyl or 631 vinyl. Once I'm finished applying that backing or the bottom half of the offset, now I'm going in and I'm applying the silhouettes of the ribbons to the tumbler. So these are just the silhouettes. All of this vinyl is acting as a template. I am going to remove this at the end. Once I was finished adding all these ribbons, I decided I wanted something else on the tumbler, so I did little silhouette hearts. I made the hearts smaller, so I made them about 1/2 inch to a little less than 1/2 inch, and then I just offsetted those as well. So I'm adding first those silhouettes, and then at the end I'm going to add that outline to the tumbler once it's epoxied. Once all my templates were placed on the tumbler, or the vinyl was placed on the tumbler, I took a heat gun and I added a little bit of glue, not a heat gun, but a glue gun, and I added some glue to the vinyl. If y'all know me, I really don't like doing this because it makes that vinyl really heavy and hard to peel up, but I didn't want to lose those vinyl pieces, so I thought I would just do this and try to make it work. So then I'm adding Mod Podge and some acrylic paint. It does not matter which finish. I am using fuchsia from Apple Barrel, and then I am using that as adhesive to add my Barbie girl from Glitter Heart Co. So I'm using that adhesive, that paint with the Mod Podge mix. I'm applying that all around the tumbler, and you'll see that I'm using a makeup brush. This was actually the first time I've used this makeup brush. I've seen people use it for the past year or so, and I finally decided to use it, and this is a game changer. This is the Wet n Wild makeup brush, and I'll have that linked in my description below. And then once that paint is still wet, I'm applying Barbie Girl all around the tumbler using just one color. Y'all can be creative, use whichever colors you like, but I wanted just one color over that lighter pink. And then I'm tapping that off and then applying the rest of the glitter around the tumbler. Once the glitter was applied around the tumbler, I am immediately going in and I'm peeling up that vinyl or templates. So this paint underneath the glitter is still wet. I like to do this way because I feel like it gives it a more crisp line and I don't have a chance of peeling that paint. But do keep in mind, this paint is wet. So with wet paint, your tools or your hands will slip. So you have to be very careful doing this. If you are not careful and you just don't think you're going to do this right, you can always just let your paint dry, let it dry for 25-30 minutes, and then go in and peel up the rest of those templates or vinyl. You'll see some of the parts where I accidentally smeared that paint away. I just took some more paint and then added a little bit more glitter to kind of clean up that area. Again, peeling up every single decal very carefully. Take your time doing this. This is part of the peekaboo process, so this is very important. You really want those lines to be crisp. You don't want them to look kind of wobbly or really off. And I made sure to do my bottom last. You'll see I haven't done the bottom because if my arm got too tired, then I just took a little bit of a break and then I placed my tumbler right side up. So I always wait to do the bottom at the end, especially since I'm having that peekaboo at the bottom. Once I was finished adding that glitter and then peeling up that vinyl, I then took my tumbler outside and I sprayed my tumbler with 3 coats of Krylon Crystal Clear acrylic coating. I sprayed the first coat, I let it dry for 10 minutes. I sprayed the second coat, let the tumbler dry for 10 minutes, and then I sprayed the third coat and then let that tumbler dry for another 10 minutes. So I sprayed, dried, sprayed, dried, sprayed, and then I moved on to epoxy in my tumbler. I use a total of 20 milliliters of epoxy for this tumbler. That's 10 milliliters part A and 10 milliliters part B, totaling 20 milliliters of epoxy. This is not going to be the last coat of epoxy, so that's why I'm not adding too much epoxy, but I want to add enough epoxy where it's not bumpy. I still want that tumbler to be nice and smooth because I am adding decals over this. So if you do have a bumpy tumbler, then add another coat of epoxy after this, and make sure you add your epoxy until your tumbler is smooth, or you will see those bumps underneath those final decals on your tumbler. And once my epoxy was cured on my tumbler, I went in with my X-Acto knife and I cleaned up that rim again. Again, this allows my cleanup process to be a lot quicker at the end. I do this after every coat of epoxy. And then I took my 180 grit sanding block and I sanded away that rim another time, exposing the tiniest bits of stainless steel just to get that good seal on the final coat of epoxy. Once I was finished with that, I sanded this tumbler with a 220 grit sanding block, again sanding lightly, and I'm using a finer grit sanding block because I do not want to sand away any of that glitter. Then I wiped the tumbler down with 91% alcohol, making sure to wipe it down very well to get rid of any excess oils or dust that may have added onto the tumbler. And once I was finished with that, I went to add those outlines to the tumbler. So this is me weeding all of those outlines. I thought about trying to keep the silhouettes for another project, but I got super lazy, so I just weeded the silhouettes, and then now I have the outlines. And then I'm applying those transfer tapes. I try to reuse my transfer tape. That's why you see me add one at a time, because this is used transfer tape. So you can use your transfer tape up to like 5 tapes depending on the strength of your transfer tape. And then I add those ribbons or the ribbon outlines over those ribbons on the tumbler. So I chose to do the white ribbon, and then I chose to outline the hearts in like a light pink. And this can be 631 vinyl or 651 vinyl. This vinyl is going to stay on the tumbler, so it does not matter if the vinyl is temporary or permanent, because you are going to epoxy over this vinyl. And once I was finished adding those outlines to the tumbler, I then moved on to adding the survivor to the tumbler. You do not have to use printed vinyl for this. I just had this on hand, so I thought I'd give it a try. And then I'm adding that in that area where that offset was placed. So you'll see how this is coming together. The survivor is going right over that offset, so it looks like that offset is really there, but behind the survivor is the glitter. Make sure you slowly peel up your transfer tape when you apply this, because you don't want to rip your vinyl. Printed vinyl is very thin, and it is a lot thinner than 631 or 651 vinyl. And here I am weeding those hearts and then adding the heart silhouettes to the tumbler. Once I was finished adding all of those outlines to the tumbler, I then went in with my CCDIY Quick Coat. This is a urethane sealer, and this allows that vinyl to really stick to the tumbler. A lot of times if you just epoxy over vinyl, then it tends to lift, and then you have a lot of sanding to do, and it's just a pain in the butt. So I add the sealer around all of the vinyl. I do not add this around the printed vinyl, so I do not add this around the Survivor, because printed vinyl for me personally from the Vinyl Cottage doesn't tend to lift, so I didn't need to add it. I don't want to add it to places where I really don't need it, so I just went around and I added it to those outline pieces, especially on the bottom, and then I let that dry for about 15 minutes before moving on to epoxying. And once that sealer was dried, I went in with epoxy in this tumbler. So I did 2 coats of epoxy for this tumbler. So the first coat, I did 10 milliliters of epoxy. That's 10 milliliters of epoxy total. So I did 5 part A and 5 part B, totaling 10 milliliters of epoxy. You are going to have some vinyl sticking up after that. That's okay. You're then going to sand your tumbler down very lightly, clean up that rim with X-Acto knife, and then you're going to go in with your final coat of epoxy, which is going to be another 10 milliliters of epoxy total. Once that's finished, you're going to clean up the tumbler and your tumbler is ready to go. So again, I use 10 milliliters of epoxy. I let that coat dry, and then I use another 10 milliliters of epoxy before cleaning up my tumbler for its final presentation. And once that final coat of epoxy is cured on my tumbler, I take my X-Acto knife for the final time and I clean up that excess epoxy around the rim, and then I take 100% acetone and then I clean out the inside with that acetone. Once I'm finished with that, I take my tumbler to my sink and I clean my tumbler inside and out with some dish soap. I like Dawn, but you can use any brand, and I make sure to use a clean paper towel when I clean out my tumbler. And then I place my lid on my tumbler and my tumbler is ready to go. This tumbler turned out beautiful. I cannot wait to see what you guys create using this inspirational video. And if you did like this video, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and crafts videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.